Welcome to the Career Studio podcast, where we boil down the noise and focus on the core concepts essential for building an energizing career you love, one that is simply an extension of who you are and how you want to live your life. Anyone can do it. It's just a matter of knowing what to focus on. Hello. My next guest is Nick Wellner. Nick is the director of player development at PointsBet, which is a global online sportsbook operating in Australia, Canada, and now the US. He is a self-described rabid sports fan and occasional sports bettor. And through our work, he was able to parlay his passion for sports into a dream career. Nick and I had a fun conversation where we discussed the value of constantly checking in on how you're feeling, being true to yourself about what you're good at and what you like to do, how he found and created the perfect role for himself through networking, and the importance of going for things that really align to your interests. Let's dive in. So, why don't you start off by just painting a picture about how you were feeling and what was going on for you in your career before you started this work on yourself?
Yeah, when prior to us, starting our sessions, the way I would best describe it is just swimming in place or treading water, if you will. It wasn't drowning. It wasn't like I needed an immediate lifeboat, but certainly wasn't thriving. It was just a very sort of net neutral feeling. So there wasn't this burning urgency to identify something new, and I didn't feel like something was missing, but it was clear that there was a whole lot more that I could be doing.
Cool. And now, how would you describe how you're feeling and what you're doing now?
Funny, when we started our work, I remember one of the early questions, you ask it weekly, but how are your energy levels? How are you feeling today? How are the energy levels? And despite a 20-degree commute with 4 inches of snow, energy levels couldn't be higher right now. I'm sure we'll get into this later on during the conversation, but count my lucky stars that I get to work in a role where sports literally is my day to day, and had a meeting about the outcome of Thursday night football last night. So hard not to feel energized about things like that.
Awesome. Yeah, you're living in Denver. Well, let me ask it this way. Let's just expand on that. The core philosophy of my business is that it takes less energy to be yourself. That when you design your career intentionally around who you are and what matters to you, that's when you can really thrive and create the most impact. And so I'd love you to just talk with a little bit more detail or specificity about how what you're doing now reflects what you know about yourself in terms of your strengths and your interests and your environmental priorities.
Yeah, and I think that really was the aha moment when we started this whole process, was that realizing when you really are happy is where you can identify that nexus between what you're good at, what you like, and what matters to you. And thinking back to our first session, remember we filled something out, hobbies, interests, and a lot of this, like sports, fitness, outdoorsy things. Didn't want to be confined in a big city. And now when I think back to where I am today in Denver, working at a sports betting company where I get to talk to clients and companies and on a daily basis, it's I definitely feel like I've found the bullseye in terms of that intersection between the three.
Totally, I agree. I'll just tell you what I see. I mean, I think one of the things you're naturally just so natural with people, right? And you build relationships really quickly. And I think part of the conversation was getting super clear on that. And you're in a business development role now. You were in sales before, and you wanted to move to BD, and then getting to use that strength to think about the things that really interest you. As you've said, sports and getting to talk about the games and the scores and the results. And then in an environment that allows you to be outdoors, right, in Denver with people who are kind of doing sports outdoors, et cetera, in a smaller city. So just to put a finer point on it, it really feels is such a good fit for you. And it's so fun to see you thrive in that environment.
Well, I appreciate the help in getting me here. I don't think I was fully prepared for the drastic change in temperature, but aside from that, it's been all good.
Yeah, just to clarify, Nick was in Sydney before, living the life, like 5 steps from Bondi Beach.
Yeah, it's a good 30 degrees colder today than any single day I experienced in Australia. But listen, it's well worth the few extra layers to be where I am now. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm jealous of your access to skiing, so that's gonna be awesome this winter. Okay, and you said that was really the aha part, was kind of getting super clear on those components of your brand. Were there any other perhaps unexpected or pivotal moments you think that really helped you go from feeling a bit like treading water in place to where you are now, feeling really energized and aligned?
yeah, the way I've sort of thought about the whole process is it's almost like a long tunnel with one light at the end of it. But as you're walking along the tunnel, you're sort of flipping on these individual light bulbs along the way. It's not as if there's one real aha moment. So maybe I lied earlier, but really a whole series of them that in aggregate lead to this one large aha moment. I think there are a couple of them. One, just that constant check in on like how you're feeling, what energizes you, what excites you. And throughout our work, so much of it was having just networking conversations, not necessarily conversations with the end goal of getting an interview or getting a job from that, but just getting a better sense of lay of the land and understanding, what does energize me, what makes me tick, what excites me. And what I realized through all of that, and then, checking in with myself after those conversations, is that it was discussions in the sporting space about the burgeoning betting industry that left me more energized than anything else, and by a long shot. So I think once you recognize, like, hey, there's something here, like this is clearly what makes me tick, then you can start to hone in a little bit more, and that's one light switch flipped. So I think that was definitely a big one. I think the being true to yourself around what you're good at and what you like to do. So I identified the industry, zeroed in on, really what it was that where I thought I could bring the most to the table, just in developing relationships, both internally within a business, externally with corporate entities or individual clients. Another light flipped on there. And just through a series of those steps, you start flipping on all the lights, and it becomes crystal clear, like, hey, I've really identified the industry I want to be in, the type of role within it, and just so happy that along the way found the perfect landing spot. So
Yeah, and I think you did such a good job at having a lot of conversations and kind of creating this opportunity for yourself. I mean, I think one of the concepts I talk a lot about is this creating luck, right? Because what you did is you had a lot of conversations, and it wasn't necessarily like you had identified PointsBet as like the place you wanted to go. It's that in the process you'd kind of talk to someone there, and then an opportunity emerged. How did that talk a little bit more about how you managed the networking process for yourself, and then how this opportunity emerged because of it?
yeah, it's funny. I tell this story to people internally, background on how I found the company. So maybe for those listeners less familiar, so PointsBet's a global, online sports book. We're live in Australia, Canada, and soon to be 14 states in the U.S. And I was living in Australia at the time, and used PointsBet as an end user. Was in a sales role at the time. Thought, hey, I think these guys could actually be a great fit for our services. So reached out to them just purely in a sales capacity. Got in touch through a connection from someone in my network. And this was as we were starting to make some progress in our own conversations, you and I, and somewhere along the way there, I realized, like, hey, rather than sell to these guys, I'd like to work for them. Seems like everything that they're doing is at that exact point of intersection between the industry I'm interested in, what I think I'm good at, where I think I can contribute, and sort of those lifestyle priorities that I have. And I'm lucky in that they sort of had the same feeling as well too. So I can't pinpoint the exact moment, but somewhere along the way, the script flipped from me selling them on buying this software solution to them really selling me on joining the company and joining the business. And you know, fortunately, because of all the work we've done, my appetite for that was pretty high at the moment. So yeah, it's just the timing. A lot of stars aligned. So I know you said, make your own luck, and I think just having those networking conversations in the industry, chatting with people who knew folks at PointsBet as a part of those networking conversations, just all of it in aggregate, you know, led to an opportunity opening up.
Totally. And I think you're able to recognize that it is an opportunity and that you maybe wanted to flip the switch from a sales call selling the software you're working on before to how can I work there? Because you had done the work, right? You'd done the work on yourself. And so then you were able to identify, oh, actually, this is actually ticking a lot of boxes. And then, the other thing I'd say is the environments that are a good fit for you will want you, right? They'll be interested in you. They'll recognize themselves in you, right? This is, again, it takes less energy to be yourself. So when you really know who you are and you're owning that and you find a space or a group of people or an opportunity that's a good fit for you, that opportunity will recognize you because you're so aligned.
It's funny you say that because now that I'm on the other side of the table interviewing people, like had two interviews today before we hopped on, it's abundantly clear straight off the bat when someone's innately passionate about the industry, about just the sporting world, tangential to the industry that we're in. That energy comes through in spades during a conversation, so much more so than someone who's like, oh, I saw the role, seemed kind of interesting. One candidate can't hold a light to the other one. So yeah, now being on the other side of the table can definitely appreciate how important it is to go for those roles in industries that you're passionate about, where the core competencies required of the role align with what you're good at, just because that passion is going to come through not only in the interview process, but then ultimately if you're hired, like the work you're doing on a day-to-day basis.
I'm curious. I don't know if we ever talked about this, but did you ever think that a career in sports or sports betting was actually possible for you? Right? Like, was there ever, I don't want to lead you with this question, but did you ever think to yourself oh, that's not available, or that would be too hard, or that's not a real job? Or tell me a little bit, just react to that.
I remember when I was in college and was interning in a whole host of different industries to try and figure out, similar to the work we did, what I liked and what I was interested in. I always wanted to work in the sporting world, but it just seemed like the jobs at that entry level especially just didn't seem appealing, and it just seemed so far-fetched to get to those roles in the sporting world, let alone the sports betting world, where you'd be doing things that excited you besides just getting coffee and making copies and stuff. So while I could certainly envision myself working in the sporting world, working in a role that I would actually enjoy in the sporting, let alone sports betting world, seemed pretty far-fetched. So yeah, it did seem a bit of a pipe dream at the time. But then again, the more conversations you have, the more you begin to realize, hey, this isn't just some fantasy that isn't exactly possible. Like it's a growing industry, roles opening up left, right, and center. And the more conversations you have with those in the industry and the know, the more of those opportunities are going to be available to you. So yeah, I think that's another benefit to really investing time in all the networking conversations throughout the process, is it starts to give you that belief that, hey, something is possible here. It is plausible that you can one day find yourself working in this industry doing something other than making coffee. So yeah, while it seemed far-fetched at the start, it definitely begins to crystallize the more work you put in.
Yeah, I love that example, because I think what you show there is what happens to so many people, is that there's a preconceived notion about what's possible, right? You were in your head of, I'd love to do this, but or the entry level role is just getting coffee, and what would it actually look like to enter that space? And you could have just stopped there, right? And been like, well, it's, I don't want to do that stuff. Right. And so I don't, I'm not going to explore it further. But by having conversations, you can actually address those fears and concerns. And what you realized was, oh, actually, I can actually see how the path through is possible. So I love that.
Yeah, and the thing you realize too, people love talking about what they do. So I'm lucky in that I'm not one to have much hesitation in reaching out to someone out of the blue to strike up a conversation. But I know folks that do. And what I would say to them is that people love to talk about themselves. They love to talk about what they do. At times, the hard part is sifting through, what's real and what's, what have they blown up a little bit more. But yeah, folks are always open to having those conversations, and the more of them you have, the more you can begin to recognize, like, what about a certain industry, company, role excites you, what doesn't excite you. So I enjoyed the process of reaching out to people, and I know it can be daunting, but it was, I had a weird enjoyment for it.
I know, I love that. And I think you are someone who is naturally really good at it, which is why you're in business development and have been in sales. And hearing, what you're reiterating is stuff that I say to my clients all the time, people that are more hesitant about those conversations. It's that people love talking about themselves. It's flattering, right? Think about if someone's ever asked you, ooh, can you give me some advice about your career? I'm 10 years behind you and I want to try and get there. I mean, it's an honor to be asked, to think that I've been successful enough, that I'm a model enough for someone to want to spend time or to want to get my advice. So yeah, it's a great example. It's a good reminder to everyone.
Yeah.
What do you think was either the hardest part or the most unexpected part of the process?
I'd say the hardest part is there's no set timeline on how long this process will take. It's not like a football game where it's 4 15-minute quarters, maybe a bit of OT, but like when the game's going to finish. That's not the case when you're trying to make a career pivot or search for that dream job. So I think that's the hardest part, is just keeping that consistent focus over time and ensuring that you're allocating a couple hours a week, a bit of time after work every day to set up those conversations, to do that follow up. Because much like someone who's going to the gym on a gym plan, you don't you don't just grow muscles overnight. Like, it's something that happens through that just consistent commitment to going to the gym. And I think this process is very similar in that regard, where you're not going to one day to the next see that immediate result, or at least not in my case, have that one aha moment, but it comes as a result of just doing the right things consistently over time. And honestly, I think that's part of where our work together was so helpful, and just knowing that we would meet on a weekly basis. That is that opportunity to check in on what have I done over the past week, and sort of measure those little incremental steps that have been taken along the way. Because I think it can be easy without that guidance and without having those regular touch points to just get sort of lost in the abyss of the search process. So that's, for me at least, what I found to be the most challenging bit was not knowing where the finish line was.
Yeah, I think part of this is about learning how to be comfortable with ambiguity and learning how to be comfortable with uncomfortable feelings in general. And I'd love for you to talk about if there's any other. I think we did some work on feelings that you've talked about before, but I think that's a big part. Let me take a step back for a second. This work is about strengthening the foundation, right? That there's kind of these foundational concepts that if you can really understand and apply, will help you bring your career and life into alignment and just make you feel more energized overall. So I'm curious, from a mindset or feeling perspective, what was interesting to you about the process, and is there anything you're taking into your life now that you use regularly from that work?
Yeah, the biggest realization is that there is this inextricable link between work and life. you can't just neatly compartmentalize one or the other. Like naturally elements of both are going to spill into the other bucket. So a lot of what we've done, and part of what I didn't even consider, something I really needed going in, was the more like emotional side of things, checking in on how things at work are making you feeling, or checking on things going on outside of work and how does that impact what you bring to the office. So our work at the time, and certainly up through to now, is maybe much more like introspective and doing that regular sort of health check on, like, all right, mentally, how am I doing? Like emotionally, how am I feeling? How does what happened at work today relate to the attitude with conversations and interactions I have with people outside of the office? So yeah, it definitely helped the I don't know if it would be like EQ, but yeah, more getting in touch with my own sort of emotions and the feeling side of things. And I know you call it the woo. Never thought coming into this I'd give a moment's thought to that woo side of things, but yeah, I really did find it helpful and calming almost. Yeah, just being conscious of it all.
So, any practices that you put in place more specifically?
Yeah, the breathing exercise that you taught me. Honestly, it's something I'll do every now and then. Is just slowing down, taking some deep breaths, and kind of calming your mind, calming your body. Started doing it a lot before sleep too. It just leads to a great night's sleep for anyone listening who's a bit of an insomniac. Yeah, but it really is, especially when you have those moments at work that get you stressed out and have you feeling all hot and red in the face. Just the ability to take that walk around the block and have a few moments of just taking those deep breaths and checking in with yourself. Yeah, it was a new skill that I hadn't ever done before. So yeah, appreciate unlocking that for me.
Great. What would you say to other people in your shoes? Let's say they're feeling, you know, work is fine, but it's not anything more than fine. What would you say?
Yeah, well, I'd say the first thing is think about those three distinct pillars. Yeah, work is one aspect of it. Life and your lifestyle priorities is another one, and your skills and interests being the third. So, if work itself and the job you're in is fine, you've nailed the lifestyle priorities bit, and think about where that balance is. I think it really is a spectrum. But if you feel like, hey, things can, maybe I want to prioritize the work component a bit more than the lifestyle component for the next phase in my career, use that as the kick in the butt, so to speak, to go out there and start having those conversations and just finding out, like, hey, is there something else I should be doing that would energize me more at work, or is more in line with what I want to be doing on a day-to-day work basis. So yeah, I would say consider both elements of that, not only the work side of it, but the lifestyle priorities bit, because those two are so uniquely intertwined.
Awesome. Yeah. Is there anything else that you would want to add or share if you had to share some words of wisdom or add anything else that you found helpful in the journey?
There's, I mean, especially if you're in that fortunate position where, not fortunate, but you have a job, you're doing okay at it, you can tread that water, so to speak, but you do have maybe this whole other part of your mind that's being untapped right now. You have the luxury of being able to invest a bit of time in exploring other opportunities and having those networking conversations. And, that's more than a lot of people have. Like, some people hate their job, but they're up to their eyeballs in work and don't have the luxury to go look around, or, don't have the luxury to maybe take time off to search for another job because they need that paycheck, week to week. So I would say, if you do have the ability, and you are just in that position where you're treading water, there's nothing to lose by taking that leap and doing a bit of exploration, by talking to those in your circle. Yeah, and that's another big thing that we worked on, is sort of your own personal board of directors, just like a Fortune 500 company has a board. Yeah, every individual I think should have one too. And think about who would those directors on your own personal board be, and have some chats with them, and have them introduce you to a few people in their own networks, and just start to really get a sense for, you know, are you good where you're at now? Is there something else you should be striving for? Is there something else you think you'd be better at, or that energizes and excites you more? And maybe the answer is no. Like, yes, things are okay where you're at today, but if that's not the case, and you do find yourself in a position where you've got the bandwidth to do a bit of that extra searching, there's nothing to lose by not taking that leap.
I love that because, the way that you've described it is you don't have to necessarily know what it is. And I think that's a mistake I often see is people think, well, I don't know what that other thing is, so I can't talk to people until I do. And what I love about how you described it is that not necessarily about knowing, it's about saying, what else could it be? Maybe here are a few ideas, and this is how you definitely did it, right? Here are a few ideas of things I think it could be. Let me go explore them and let me see which ones spark energy, if any, right? And then let me follow the ones that spark energy. So I think that's really important for people to take away is that you don't have to know what the answer is. In fact, you usually won't until you get out there and have conversations and maybe even take it further and do a side project to test it further. So just get out there and remember people love talking about themselves.
Yeah, it is. It definitely is an iterative process. I think you start with this sort of theory on where you think your interest would be. I know we did that. There are a couple of industries that initially we zeroed it down to, and then you start having conversations, and the scope begins to narrow, and every conversation helps that lens of focus get just a little bit tighter until you suddenly have identified what that perfect dream job is. So every conversation, while it may not seem it at the time, helps that view of focus tighten just a little bit more.
Yeah, I love that. And then I would just add to that caveat slightly, like you love what you do, and for you it's definitely the perfect dream job. But also it's great for you now, but like who knows how you're going to feel in like 5 years or 10 years, right? And so I just want to add that it's not always like one thing is the only thing, but certainly you're super aligned and energized right now, and it's awesome for the person that you are today.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, there's always going to be elements of work that you don't love. Like, I'm sure there are days Tom Brady doesn't want to come to the training facility and fling a football around, whereas everyone else across the country, that's their dream job. So there definitely are days or things that you do where you'd rather be somewhere else. But I think it's when you take a step back and look at what you're doing in totality, we can say, all right, I'm in the perfect spot. I'm doing exactly what I want to be doing. So yeah.
You're super aligned, and it's awesome to see.
Feeling it.
Awesome. Anything else you want to share?
Let me think. I mean, those are really the biggest drivers for me. I mean, the networking conversations we had, you just holding me accountable. I would say that so much of it's like you ever been bowling with kids where they put the bumpers up, or even just, I'm a very shitty bowler, so they'll sometimes put them up for me, the little bumpers and the gutters. The ball can still do its own thing within the lane, but the gutters will help keep it on the right track. In a lot of ways, I feel like that's the role that you played for me is, I've got the ability I'm making my own decisions and having these conversations, and, whatever turns come, I'm taking them, but you're helping point me in the right direction, and, really ensuring that don't stray sort of too far from the right processes and approach. So, I'd say that was where a lot of the value in our conversations lied. So, yeah, that's maybe one last thing I'd add there.
Yeah. Well, I think it was really obvious for me as we were talking that sports betting was what lit you up. And I think sometimes having that other person to reflect back to you the thing that you kind of know inside yourself anyways, but sometimes you second guess yourself. I think that can be helped too.
Yeah, that's where the sort of the emotional side of all the work that you do comes in. Teaching clients to check in with yourself and see how you're feeling and seeing how certain situations make you feel, because it's only when you do that that you recognize, like, hey, this work's okay, I'm treading water, but I feel kind of flat in the office or frustrated. And then comparing that with having conversations in an industry or with a company that really excites you and seeing how you feel after those, that's what leads to one of those little light switches going off, is just seeing your different sort of physical and emotional responses to one situation versus the other.
Perfect. Yeah, you've nailed it. And I'm really excited for you and then the life that you're building in Denver.
Oh, thank you.
Awesome. All right. That's the podcast. Hey, if you're ready to create an energizing career you love, one that is simply an extension of who you are and how you want to live your life, then I want to invite you to schedule a consultation. We'll get to the bottom of what's going on for you and exactly where you need to focus to bring your career and life into alignment. It's free. Just head on over to thecareer.studio/schedule to find a time that works for you. Or if you're enjoying and getting value from these episodes, I'd love you to leave a short review on whatever podcast app you use. This helps other people like you find and get value from the podcast too.